just a thief!
No.
I'm Ant-Man. I know. Wasn't my idea.
If you're only familiar with the Ant-Man films, you'll have picked up on the fact that they primarily feature Paul Rudd as Scott Lang, who happens to be the second Ant-Man, and Hank Pym, who Michael Douglas plays in the films, is not only the original Ant-Man, but also one of the very first Marvel superheroes. With the upcoming release of Ant-Man and the Wasp, let's dive into the full comic book history of Ant-Man. But first, make sure to subscribe to GameSpot Universe for more comic book history, breakdowns, or comparisons of anime to their manga counterparts. In the 1950s, before Marvel existed as we know it, there was Atlas Comics. Atlas Comics was, in turn, the successor of Timely Comics. While superhero comics have been successful for the company in the past, they lost popularity, and Atlas Comics resorted to copying whatever else was popular. This led to some success, but eventually mass layoffs before artist Jack Kirby would start working at the company alongside Stan Lee and Larry Lieber. Together, they helped launch a number of new series for Atlas Comics: Amazing Adventures, Strange Worlds, Tales of Suspense, World of Fantasy, and Tales to Astonish. Tales to Astonish, which started as an anthology series of various science fiction one-offs. Many of these comics included mad scientists, and one of them just happened to stick. In January 1962, Tales to Astonish number 27 released, which featured a brand new mad scientist, Henry Pym, or Hank, as we now know him. Hank Pym is upset because fellow scientists at a science convention find his theories too outlandish and sets out to prove them wrong. In doing so, he invents a serum that will shrink objects to ant size and one that will re-enlarge them. He tests the serum on himself, only to find himself under attack by ants, and narrowly escapes with the help of a friendly ant, where he regrows himself. And that could have been the end of Henry Pym, as we don't see him for a few more editions after that. It wasn't until later that year, in September 1962, that Hank Pym would return in Tales to Astonish number 35, this time as the Ant-Man. At this point, Hank Pym has discovered how to create a cybernetic helmet that allows him to communicate with ants, as well as a steel mesh costume for protection made out of unstable molecules, which allows it to shrink and grow with him. And if you forget that, don't worry, because they remind you in every single issue that follows. With the introduction of Ant-Man, for a while, Tales to Astonish became a series completely focused on Ant-Man and his adventures. In issue number 44, Hank Pym gained a female sidekick in The Wasp, or Janet Van Dyne, and she would eventually become his love interest and marry him. Although, the way they do this in the comics is very 1960s and a little weird. On meeting Janet Van Dyne, Hank Pym immediately starts to fall for her as she reminds him of his murdered ex-wife. Meanwhile, Janet Van Dyne immediately falls in love with Hank Pym the day she meets him, and after turning into the Wasp, continuously makes advances on him as he pushes her away for being a silly woman. Yeah, that's how they do it. Anyways, the two do eventually fall in love and marry each other, but not before a few major events. Ant-Man and the Wasp both appeared in the very first issue of the Avengers in 1963 alongside Iron Man, the Hulk, and Thor. Not only that, but it was actually Ant-Man's idea to form the Avengers, which consisted of those 5. In his own comics, Ant-Man eventually invented a way to become all kinds of sizes, including extra large, and for a time became known as Giant Man. After a year break from being in any comics, from 1965 to 1966, Giant Man reappeared in the Avengers with the new identity of Goliath, calling his former name Cheesy. During this stint as an Avenger, he accidentally created Ultron and helped destroy it. Finally, he went through yet another transformation as Yellow Jacket after a botched experiment where he inhaled chemicals giving himself schizophrenia. Despite supposedly curing his schizophrenia, Hank Pym remained a bit of an asshole, and in issue number 213 of the Avengers, went completely over the edge. While on trial by the Avengers for attacking an enemy after they'd already surrendered, he created a robot to fight them with the secret weak point only he knew in order to look like a hero, and in a fit of rage, smacked the Wasp across the face, aka his wife. She just wanted to sleep with him. She just wanted to sleep with him. Fast forwarding in time quite a bit, we get to Scott Lang and the second Ant-Man, who was created by David Michelinie and John Byrne in 1979, and first appeared with a cameo in the Avengers number 181. Prior to becoming the Ant-Man, Scott Lang was a burglar who, after being sent to prison, went straight in order to make money and care for his daughter. His job out of prison was working for Tony Stark, designing an advanced security system, which is where we see him during his first appearance in the Avengers. A month later, Scott Lang was featured in the 47th issue of Marvel Premiere as the AntMan. Similar to the film, Scott Lang obtains the suit by breaking into Hank Pym's home and stealing it from him. However, unlike the film, in the comics this is because his daughter is sick, and the only doctor who can save his daughter has been abducted by the rich CEO of Cross Technological Enterprises, Darren Cross. Scott uses the suit to break into Cross Technological Enterprises and save his daughter. He later learns Hank Pym, now his Yellow Jacket, had witnessed the entire thing, including his burglary. Impressed by Scott Lang's ability to fight off the mutated Darren Cross and his intentions of helping his daughter, Hank Pym allows Scott Lang to keep the Ant-Man suit and become the new Ant-Man. Finally, going way forward, we come to the third person to don the Ant-Man attire, this time being Eric O'Grady, a creation of Phil Hester and Robert Kirkman of Walking Dead fame in 2006. O'Grady starred in a standalone comic, The Irredeemable Ant-Man, where he essentially stole the Ant-Man costume. O'Grady was working as a low-level S.H.I.E.L.D. agent on the same helicarrier where Hank Pym is working on a brand new Ant-Man suit. Hank Pym enrolls a number of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents to potentially be the new Ant-Man, including a friend of O'Grady's, Mitch Carson. Due to a threat on the helicarrier, Mitch Carson enlists Eric O'Grady and his roommate Chris McCarthy to guard Hank Pym. However, when Hank Pym leaves his lab, in a panic, O'Grady knocks Hank Pym out. Unsure of what to do, the two roommates find the Ant-Man suit, and Chris McCarthy tries it on, accidentally becoming ant-sized and stuck that way for a time. A couple days later, the helicarrier is attacked, and O'Grady witnesses his roommate Chris McCarthy get shot in the head. He takes the Ant-Man suit for his own survival, and then runs away, using the suit primarily to impress girls and try to sleep with them. The powers of Ant-Man have shifted over time, with different costumes and variations to Hank Pym's own body. The costume of Ant-Man allows its wearer to shrink and grow in size utilizing a gaseous component, and for a time, pills of different sizes. Even though Ant-Man can shrink to the size of an ant, its wearer will still maintain the power of their full body size, allowing them to injure or trip their enemies with relative ease at their smallest. Thanks to the cybernetic helmet invented by Hank Pym, Ant-Man can communicate with ants, who are oftentimes used to assist in his missions in a variety of ways. He also uses these ants to form a soft landing spot for whenever he's launched or falling too far, and rides on them. Eventually, after the introduction of the Wasp, he rides on a flying ant. And there you have a not-so-brief comic history of Ant-Man. He's been around since the 1960s and is a surprisingly important member of Marvel's history, being one of the founding members of the Avengers. Do you have a favorite incarnation of Ant-Man or character donning the suit? Let us know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time. Later, guys. Peace.